In today's video, we're taking these Solo Werks S1 coilovers and slamming the squid on it. Let's show you how. First things first, you want to jack up the car, take off the wheels, and get it up in the air like this. And just like that, you're ready to rock. Let it be known, it's 12:37 at night on a Friday night, and I just got done with the first half. I wanted to make sure that I had everything buttoned up and figured out before I told you guys how to do it. On that note, something that definitely helped me is spraying down all the nuts and bolts, especially since we're from the East Coast, at least I am, with PB Blaster. This will break through the rust and allow you to break free a lot of those bolts and nuts that normally will give you a hard time. We're gonna start off with the back first. The back's a lot easier, a lot quicker. After figuring out everything, I streamlined the process a little bit more, so we're going right to the back. Start off by removing this fender liner here. You have 3 T25 bolts along the backside here, followed by a bunch of little plastic clips all around the outside edges and across the top. And once you take all that off, you should just be able to pull your fender liner right out and access the top 2 bolts to the strut mount. You should just be able to start tugging around the edge. It's gonna be a little dirty. Just like that, your fender liner's out. Once you remove your fender liner, you're gonna go up to the top of the strut to remove these 2 bolts with a 16mm ratchet. Once you get down under the strut, you come to the bottom here and you're gonna have this little plastic cover that you pull the clips back from to remove. And that gives you access to this 21mm bolt that you have to remove. Definitely want to spray this one with Blaster. As you can see, it has a lot of rust because it sits right on the road with all the water, salt, and grime. I'm going to hit it with a breaker bar and pop this sucker off. This bolt is a little bit of a nasty time, so I recommend using at least a 20-inch breaker bar for this bad boy. But now it's backing out and we should have no problem. Shout out to Grandpa. He saw me in my one video without safety goggles, so he sent me a whole box. Thank you so much for that. Keeping the eyes safe. So you're just gonna give it a little pop, compress the strut all the way down. It shouldn't rebound at all. And just like that, you wanna maneuver it up and out. Now you may be reusing this part. In that case, you can just pop this cap off, take out the nut, and reuse this part. But I bought ECS heavy duty upper strut mounts, so I'm gonna be using those. Once your strut is out, the next bolt that you're gonna wanna remove is this sway bar linkage here. It's a 16mm bolt. You're just gonna back that all the way out and let that sit freely inside of the rear subframe back here. Something else to keep in mind while removing that bolt is that you're under the compression of the spring now in the rear. So you're gonna wanna jack up the bottom side of this A-arm just a little bit to hold that pressure so that the rear sway bar bolt doesn't have pressure on it when you start removing it, because the A-arm does wanna go down from the spring uncompressing. After freeing up that sway arm mount, we're heading over and it's finally time to remove the spring, which is a little bit of a sketchy part. Some people remove the subframe. I personally don't wanna do that. So I got these spring compressors from Harbor Freight. You basically just throw them on the coil, tighten them down, and then the spring will compress itself so that you can pull it out, leaving the gap for the new spring. So once you have your spring compressor fully tightened down, I like to get a little baby wedge in there, a little bit of a crowbar, kind of work the spring sideways, get that up under the bushing. Don't have to worry about this top bushing. We're not going to be reusing it. With a little extra oomph and prying, using your feet on the strut shield and prying at the top. Finally, that bad boy comes out and you can just push it right out the bottom. This is our stock spring with the spring compressor on it, a little bit bent, but it doesn't matter, we won't be using this anyways. And these are the 2 parts that we will be reusing, the bottom bushing as well as the strut guard. After that, you're gonna take the new spring, maneuver it back up through the bottom and into place. Then you'll be just about done with the back. You just have to hit the 2 bolts on the top, the 1 bolt on the bottom, the sway bar linkage bolt, and then button everything up, torque it down to spec, which I will add the torque specs for each of the bolts and show you which ones are which. You definitely want to use anti-seize lubricant around the shock collar to make sure that this does not freeze up from grime and debris that gets kicked up while driving. So the orientation of this in the rear of your car will be the flat part of the spring up, the shock collar on top, the rubber plastic spacer on there, and then this will replace that top bushing. On the bottom, you'll have the guard at the lowest point, the bushing stacked on top of the guard like so, lining up this pin through them. Then as you can see, there's a coil with a bump stop. Make sure that the end of your spring coil is lined up with that bump stop so that everything fits together properly underneath the car. Once you have all of that set up, you're gonna throw it in the bottom of the car and get everything buttoned up. As you can see, I managed to get the spring back in there, actually relatively easy, as long as you take it through this back corner and you already have the bushing sitting in the bottom. Once you do that, all you need to do is take your shock collar wrenches, adjust this ring to your desired ride height, and you should be about set for putting the spring back in. Just make sure it's lined up with that bump stop like I showed you before to ensure that it is seated properly and you get the best performance out of your new springs. So if you don't have a ton of specialty tools to use at home, to get the top strut mount on the rear strut itself, I'm using a 17mm extended socket, slapping it on the bolt, and we're going to take our 5mm extended hex bit, put it in reverse, go until we hit 18 Newton meters. All right, once you hear the snap, you should be good, which means your top strut mount is now mounted to your rear strut. These top two bolts will get torqued to 90 newton meters plus 90 degrees of stretch. And then you can't forget about our last two bolts. Down on the bottom, you have the sway bar link, which is 45 newton meters, and then the bolt down here, which is 111 foot-pounds or newton meters. I'll put it on the screen what it is, plus a 180 degree turn for stretch. Don't forget, when you're putting this bolt on, in between the knuckle and the bushing, that is where that washer goes, and then you feed the bolt through and you're set. All right, now the last step is to reinstall your fender liner, button up all those clips, put in the 3 bolts with the T25 bit, and then we're gonna move to the front and continue. It is now 2:39 in the morning on Saturday morning from Friday night. I think it's time to go to bed. I'll wake up in the morning bright and early to hit the front of the car and install that suspension with you guys.
Many hours later.
It's the next day. Now it's time to get ripping on the front coilover. Here we are in the front. The first 2 bolts you're gonna take off are these plastic 10 millimeters to remove this drive shaft guard. It's one here, and then one on the other side. The next bolt you're going to remove is a 16 millimeter at the top of the knuckle here where the sway bar connects. I would recommend jacking up the bottom of the knuckle so that the weight of the spring doesn't send it down to the ground. Once you get that off, you're going to come around back, and at the bottom of the shock itself, you're going to remove this 18 millimeter bolt and nut on the back here. Once you get this bolt removed, you're going to take your specialty tool called a strut spreader, throw it in the gap here, give it a 90 degree twist, and leave that sitting for the time being. So it removes the tension from the shock arm. After that, you're gonna wanna come up to the top of the subframe assembly, and they say you're supposed to remove these pinch bolts here, but they gave us a hell of a time yesterday. And I found that it's easier just to remove the arms from the back inside of here. It's a 16 millimeter nut and bolt on both sides. You're gonna pull those out, and then this whole assembly should pop towards you. We got these 2 top arms off, swing them to the side, they're just on ball joint. And then we're gonna come down and we're gonna remove that bolt there at the bottom of the shock knuckle. It's an 18 millimeter nut and bolt, should come right out. Once you successfully removed all those bolts, now is the time to smack the knuckle off of the shock tower itself. Like I said, make sure that strut spreader is sitting there in the back. And like you saw, it literally just slid down. Push it down a little bit. Just like that, your knuckle comes out, baby.
Great success.
Once you remove that, you're gonna come to the top of the car. Located up here on top of the engine bay is 1, 2, 3, and then a 4th bolt back there. They're 16 millimeters. You're gonna remove the 4 of those, and then your entire assembly for this top piece up here should come down. So once you got those top 4 bolts off, you're gonna come down. Ooh, a little dirty. Give it a yank and start to slide your entire shock assembly out from underneath your car. To get this top cap off, you're gonna slap an 18 millimeter offset wrench on that bolt up inside the tower, and then we're gonna use a 6 millimeter extended Allen key to work it out. Broke it free. Now some people say to use a spring compressor so this doesn't shoot apart. Usually by the time you're doing this, your shocks are shot anyways, so the spring is already pretty low. But once you get to that point, the top bushing comes off, the nut comes off, and then you're gonna wanna save the little washer along with the rubber bushing. Give it a pull, and just like that, your old shock is off. All right, I'm about to unload a lot of information on you guys. Once you got it disassembled, make sure you take your new shock. You're gonna add anti-seize lubricant on the threads to make sure that you can actually adjust them if you ever need to in the future. You're gonna wanna make sure that you seat the top of the spring in the bushing where the bump stop is, and then you're gonna wanna proceed with the shaft. You're gonna go washer, top mount, and then you're gonna go bushing, and then the nut. Once you get there, you're gonna take a 19 millimeter wrench, pop it in there. You're gonna go 44 foot-pounds or 60 newton meters of torque on this top bolt here. Once you made it there, you got everything tightened down. We're basically gonna do exactly the steps that we did to take everything off to put it back on. So I'll show you how to do that now, because the other YouTube videos I watched didn't show me that, and it pissed me off because it sucked to put everything back together, and there is technique to it. So once you put that piece back up inside there, we're gonna tighten these 4 bolts, 3, 4, in this fashion, going 1, 2, 3, 4. You're gonna give them 40 newton meters plus 90 degrees of stretch. Now you're gonna make your way back down to the bottom of the car. You're gonna take the knuckle where the strut goes into. You're gonna put the strut spreader in there, and then we're gonna feed this back into the car, slide it up on the coilover, and then you take the strut spreader out and you're locked in. Next step, just to hold it into place, you're gonna loosely put this bolt and nut back in the bottom of this knuckle, and you're not gonna torque this down yet. You're gonna let that sit, but it's just to hold this assembly together for now. Next, we're gonna add these arms back up to the top there, throw the 16 millimeter nuts and bolts back in on each side, and then you're set to move on to the next step. We got the linkages back up top. Next up on the list, we're gonna take our bolt, put it back in the rear side of the carrier here, slide it in, button it up. This bolt is going to be 40 Newton meters plus 180 degrees of stretch on top of that. After you tighten this bolt up, you're going to jack up the bottom of the A-arm to get the knuckle aligned with the top link of the sway arm. And then you're going to add that bolt back in, snug it down as tight as you can get it. There's no room to fit a torque wrench back there. And then one last bolt on the bottom and you're done. For the second to last step, you're going to want to jack the arm up to where you think it would be for ride height. Then you're come around, you're going to tighten this bolt to 66 foot-pounds with a 90-degree turn. So it was at 12 and then the final torque was at 90. Final piece of the assembly is adding back on the drive shaft cover. That goes right back behind here and screws them with the two 10 millimeters on each side, like how it was when you took it off. Just like that, you're done installing your coilovers. It's time to throw the rims back on. You want to remember when you put your rims back on, the torque spec rating for the lug studs on our specific B8 and B8.5 Audi A4s is 90 Newton meters. You want to snug those up. But on that note, slap it on the car, drop it to the ground, and let's take a look. And just like that, you officially lowered your very own B8 or B8.5 Audi A4. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, make sure to drop them in the comments below. Make sure to like, subscribe, share it, and I'll see you guys soon. Peace.